we wanted to kind of start with the thing that happened today, the United Football Players Association statement. Where did that? I was so baffled when I saw that. I'm like, this is a kind of semi-existent union that doesn't represent any CFL players. Where do they come off?
Oh, I was hoping you'd tell me, because I'd never heard of these guys before. And if you saw the clip from my show, I was talking to a CFL guy right when this dropped. So I read it to him over the phone, and I'm like, hey, whoever worded it, it sounded very professional, didn't it? You know, like you could see how people would be fooled by it. But we kind of did a little digging. And listen, I got nothing against Ken Farrow. I was following him before. He was a pro baller. I apparently he played here in Saskatchewan not that long ago. I think he had a cup of coffee. I'm not saying he's not legit. But I talked to a guy with an alumni association. He's like, guys get disgruntled and they go off and splinter their own alumni association or their own players association. This is not sanctioned, guys, by the Canadian Football League. And all the media in Canada was scrambling to get a statement from the CFL to say, is there anything to this? I didn't need to go to the CFL because I knew that this UFPA wasn't even affiliated with the Canadian Football League. And like within an hour, the CFL denounced the statement. So and now, by the way, those guys have come back at me, the UFPA, and they've said, you haven't done your due diligence. You're misrepresenting us. Wait. Hey, you saw that?
I saw what they wrote. Yeah.
Ooh, I know legal speak too. And the point is, they may still cancel this season in the Canadian Football League, but I'm not going to come around and say these guys were right. If they cancel the Canadian Football League season, it'll be a CFL decision, not something from the Players Association. That, don't you guys think when I got players in the CFL DMing me saying, what is this? Wouldn't a union know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you know, we're friends with them. I've reached out, you know, I tweeted at them. I said, you know, we're going to have Rod on today. You know, our episode, I think we're going to push it Thursday now to kind of get ahead of all this stuff. You know, we certainly have given them, if they want to come on later today when we're done with this or tomorrow, you know, to respond, because it is something that, you know, we've had no XFL stuff for, you know, 18 years, right? And then last week goes crazy. And then this week now, this morning with all this stuff, I mean, it's just been so overwhelming trying to keep up with it. So yeah, no, we know them. They follow us. We've talked about them on the show back when they formed. It's a lot of former XFL guys. And at the core of it, I do think what they're trying to look out for is when we have like Fan Control Football here in the States. That's this new kind of like offshoot Twitch thing. XFL, we had the Spring League this year where they flew all these guys down to San Antonio, and then like they weren't feeding them properly. There was COVID outbreaks. They had to shut the whole season down. So at a core, what they're trying to do is good, right? Where they're trying to band together a lot of these players from not the NFL. So just to give some context for that, we have gone back. So I'm not saying that they're like the be all end all one way or another, but I do get what they're trying to do somewhat.
But
they're trying to, yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Sorry, at that point, they don't represent any CFL players. The CFL players are represented by the CFLPA. And so why is a union that isn't representing any CFL players commenting at all?
I know what they're trying to protect the players. I love the players. I'm on the players' side. I'm all for all of that. And believe me, I've had buddies that have played in the Spring League, and I'm following the Fan Control Football League very closely. I'm entertained by ball. I'm on the players' side. But in that clip today, and I talked about it today, just don't represent the CFL because you don't. That's all. And by the way, I think the big crux with me was the way it was worded. It said they cited sources, coaches and players in the CFL that the next 2 seasons were going to be canceled. You can't send out a news release citing rumors. You can't do that. If you send out a news release, say it's canceled, period. So I just think I just don't think they know what they're doing.
That seems like something in the front office of the CFL, like in the commissioner's office. If they had sources within the commissioner's office that said this, there might be more weight to it. But you're talking to maybe one player, one coach they're giving opinions maybe, and then all of a sudden they run with it and say, "Oh, it's confirmed. They're going to do this." It seems weird.
We're getting just a little. Your mic's rubbing on your jacket just a little bit from your headphones. that up near the call. Yeah. So just in general, we've really been sprung on all this CFL stuff. I mean, the last week, obviously, we were going to start covering everything anyway, needing kind of some football content here, alternative football content. Did all this come out of nowhere to you too? All these talks and everything between the XFL and the CFL?
Okay, it did. But I told you guys before we went to air, and I'll say it here. When the XFL was first formed in 2001, I had a lot of friends playing the league. CFL guys have played in both seasons. And I thought, you know what? We were living hand to mouth as a CFL back then. I'm like, Vince McMahon's got more money than God. Why would we not bring the two leagues together? That was 20 years ago. Prior, I faced the firing squad for saying that from CFL fans. And that was before Twitter and Facebook. See, the backlash was immense. So the notion of having a merger or a collaboration was never new to me. But when it came out that they were actually talking, yeah, I was absolutely stunned. But the more that we've had CFL media, people on my show in the last week, they all realized the CFL wouldn't be doing this if they weren't at death's door financially. And I don't know where you guys fall on this, but what the people, I'm for it. I'm for whatever will work for both leagues. CFL's got a 100-year brand. Pretty good football, despite what Pat McAfee says, calls it state fair football, but whatever. It's got the brand. One thing the CFL's always done right is football. They haven't done business right. They haven't done marketing right. It's a shrinking business. Attendance is going down. Ratings are going down. The XFL doesn't have a 100-year brand. They have a year and 5-week brand, but they do business well. They do marketing off the charts. They've got the TV contracts on national news. Are on national networks. So if you bring the two together, it seems like a perfect marriage. That's why I'm supporting it.
Especially when you think if you're trying to grow the game of the CFL, you have to think outside the border. You have to think, well, how can we get our Canadian Football League teams into U.S. markets and maybe get some exposure in those markets and grow? That's why I'm in favor of it too. Expanding that footprint for Canadian football teams.
But this is why I think this is new, and why I think if they've been talking prior to last week, I don't think it's been for very long, because our commissioner of the Canadian Football League, Randy Ambrosie, is a former player. And for the last 18 months, he's been pushing what he called CFL 2.0 global initiative. Have you been following this at all? We've had,
I've read a little bit. Yeah, this coming up.
Yeah. So we've had a global draft. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who are down the street from me, the stadium's 5 minutes from where I am right now, had a Mexican player on their roster and a German player last year. Well, they couldn't play. They couldn't get on the field. They weren't at the level of a CFL player. Listen, our caliber of play is tremendous. Our caliber of athlete is tremendous. But those European and Mexican players, they simply weren't. And so what Randy Ambrosie said to me is, well, look at the NBA. When they brought over Yao Ming, it started the international influx, and look where it is now. And look at the NHL and the 80s invasion. If you guys are hockey fans of the Russians and the Swedes and the Czechs, I'm like, Randy, Yao Ming was an all-star his first year. Sergei Makarov was the rookie of the year in the NHL in 1988. They came in right at par. So your global initiative, I love our commissioner. He's a great dude. These guys can't play. And our fans sniffed it out immediately. They know. So he wanted to expand past our borders, but he wasn't looking at America. He was looking at Europe, and he was looking at Mexico. So there's that. And the other thing is, we have the all-time winningest coach in the Canadian Football League, a guy by the name of Wally Buono. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of him, but he racked his wins up with the BC Lions and the Calgary Stampeders. He's an absolute icon in the CFL. He's Bill Belichick without the cheating, and he's a good guy. And a year ago, he said on my you know what he's done? He's Don Shula of Canada, okay? And he said the CFL's getting stale. And nobody said a word. I say on my show the CFL's getting stale. And again, everybody wants to disbar me and lambaste me and stuff. I'm like, Wally said the same thing. We're getting stale. So the XFL is exciting. I watched all the games last year. Mark Trestman's a really good friend of mine. Jamie Elizondo's become a friend of mine. I just think the synergies are all there. So anyway, we need to grow because we're dying. But you saw the backlash from our fans. My God. Like, they're saying they're going to burn their tickets, never go to a game. I don't believe that, but you're seeing the passion of CFL fans. They've long been passionate.
But see, that's what I don't get is, and we said when we did our big episode last week, we're the XFL Markcast, but we're not trying to be marks for like, okay, the XFL has been, is nearly as important as the CFL or all this kind of stuff, right? But why is it where the NFL has commanded the most money it ever has this year? We talked about all the TV ratings and deals, a week or two ago, 100% TV now rights fees, year over year to this year compared to last year. And then, where the CFL is clinging to survive. What is it about like that game? Or is it, I've seen all the excuses this week, CFL's got less, there's less teams. Canada has less population. I mean, why is it that the CFL here is breathing, hardly breathing the life, but yet NFL is as popular as it's ever been?
Well, just allow me, just a small history lesson.
Yeah.
Americans came to the CFL in the 60s and 70s because the CFL paid more. Some of our icons, again, they won't mean anything to you, their names, but George Reed, retired as the all-time rushing leader, all-time sack leader Ron Estee, came to the CFL because it was paying more than the NFL. And around 1980, the NFL just took off like a rocket. And I assume it was because of television revenue. I'm sure that's what it was. And the marketing machine that is the NFL. The salaries in the CFL haven't really changed for 40 years. Starting rookie salary right now for an American or a Canadian too is like $62,000 American. The salaries never went up. So I can tell you whose salaries have gone up exponentially: presidents, CEOs, general managers, head coaches. So what the critics of the CFL are saying, it's a top-heavy league. We've got, the last season they played, a couple of quarterbacks making $750 grand a year. Nothing wrong with that. That's more than some guys in the NFL. But that's like, I can count them on one hand. Everybody else is making nothing. So the people that have been running the CFL for 50 years have been football guys. And that's why I say they've got football right. The game's great. The talent's great. But they have not been really good business guys. And over the last decade or so, the shifts have been for business people to run the teams. And they've run it somewhat into the ground to where we are right now. And the other thing is that a CFO of a team told me probably 4 years ago, he said, the number one issue we're facing in the CFL right now is ticket sales. It's been declining rapidly. That's where their revenue is. So that kind of gives you, they did not keep up business wise. Their marketing has not been good. And it's come back to bite them. The pandemic just exposed all this.
How much do the teams get paid out from the TSN contract? Do you know offhand?
Yeah. Every team, rough figures, every team's salary cap is 6.25. That's their payroll, 6.25 million. And the I know. Is that a lot or not a lot? Not a lot.
Yeah. That's dirt cheap.
Yeah.
Right. So TSN's contract covers every team's payroll.
For context, for the salary cap this year for NFL is 182.5 per team.
Right. So JJ Watt just signed for what, 3 times what a CFL team makes.
32 million for 2 years he's on.
So you're saying and there's no money left over from that? Is it just that's all they pay is just the salaries?
That's what they pay the teams. And then that covers the payroll. So from a business perspective, I was on the radio in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, and it was a hockey guy interviewing me, but he said, if all the payroll's paid and the number one cost in the CFL is labor, why aren't we playing? Why can't they make any money? I said, because they spend too much on office salaries and they just spend on things that don't matter. So I'm just telling you, the TV deal pays for the players, period. I think that's pretty good.
I guess I'm trying to do the math and wonder if there's any more left over from what TSN pays. Because if TSN just pays the salaries for the players and that's all they pay, you're talking $60 million. That's all they pay for the rights for the TV?
Yeah, it's actually, I think, a little less. But the Saskatchewan Roughriders, which have they're like the Dallas Cowboys of the CFL. Their last season they played, they made $19 million in ticket sales alone. 19 million in the year. That's leftover money. So a lot of people are going, where'd that money go? Like, it's been bled out through the pandemic because the league hasn't played in a year and 15 months. So they've been paying their coaches, paying their staff. Like in the pandemic, here's another problem with the CFL. The only people weren't being paid were the players. How do you think that went over? And listen, the coaches are my buddies. The staff, all those people, I worked in the league for 20 years. They're my friends. but they were being paid. The players weren't until they made a huge stink over it. So the players were at the bottom of the totem pole in the CFL, whereas in the NFL, it's like this, right? So they've just done a lot of things backwards. And to get to this XFL, CFL collaboration talk, guys, the commissioner's pretty steadfast in saying, we're just talking. We're just talking. We're not talking about a merger. We're just, the message that's been sent to me to share to the viewers, I don't necessarily believe it, but they're saying, we just want to tap into the Rock's contacts, his brand, his marketing abilities, but we don't want anything to change with the CFL. We don't want to merge. We want to keep our 9 teams, maybe grow to a 10th in Canada. We want to stay with 3 downs in the larger field and all of that. And I'm like, guys, you think that you're going to use the Rock because he's CFL alum out of the goodness of his heart? I literally said to the guy that told me this, what's the Rock get out of this?
Yeah.
He goes, well, he's just going to do it for free.
No.
Well, they believe that.
Well, it's interesting. So I was just on, so our podcast is part of XFL News Hub, and they're kind of like I would say the premier XFL kind of news site here. And so we were just on a roundtable last night. So this would be Monday when this is airing, all the writers, everybody trying to fantasize all these different things. Is it, do we do a CFL season and an XFL season? Are we merging the teams? Are we bringing them in? Or, do we, what do you see coming from all this?
If we just back up for a second, before the XFL came on the table, I was fully thinking one of 2 things was going to happen. MLSE was just going to buy the CFL like the Rock bought the XFL. MLSE is Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. That's the corporation in Toronto that owns the Maple Leafs, the Raptors, the Toronto Argonauts, Toronto FC Soccer, plus the facilities they play in. Big company. That went off the table because they looked at their own bank account and said, we're hemorrhaging in the pandemic. They don't have money to buy the CFL. Next, I thought it would be NFL Europe, which was a spring league. And I had coaches calling me who had worked in NFL Europe and NFL, and they're like, hey, Rod, how would that work? I said, play in the spring, just like the NFL Europe. They just slapped Canada on it instead of Europe. Well, our commissioner went to Roger Goodell. Sounds like they had a few talks, and Goodell said, we're not interested. We encourage you to be your own self-sustaining league, which they haven't been able to do. So now enter the XFL, right? So here's my take on this, is it becomes a spring-summer league. We've been a summer-fall league. I mean, you guys are football fans. You know when we play. Kick off basically June 1st and go to December 1st. And it's worked okay. But I think that it's March here, and although we have brutal winters, it's melting. It's above 35 Fahrenheit, right? We could open training camp in March, kick off April 1st, and go to the end of September and get our 6-month season in, amalgamated with the XFL. So you guys start right after Super Bowl. Well, we're just backing it up a month.
And then you wouldn't have to compete necessarily with the NFL, because I don't know, like, do more people watch the NFL in Canada than they watch the CFL?
See, this is another problem. Yeah, we got all the great questions. This is another problem that I have. Obviously, when I called games for 20 years, I was close with the TV guys. I was doing radio. And I said to them, guys, you better start pumping your broadcast more and marketing a little better, because the NFL is gaining on you. And the broadcaster for TSN, our ESPN, goes, no, they'll never beat it. They'll never beat us. Canada loves the CFL. That was probably 10 years ago. I would say CFL ratings were here. NFL was here. It's gone like that. They caught them and passed them. So we do compete with the National Football League, to the point that in the last 2 years, we've moved all our fall games off Sundays because we were getting murdered by the NFL, and moved them to Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Thursday night football became a thing in the CFL. So my point to you is 15 years ago, didn't compare with the NFL. Now they're losing to the NFL. And NFL Canada is an incorporated arm of the NFL. They do not get along with not only the CFL, but Football Canada, which is our sanctioned governing body for university football, junior football, high school football.
We're getting a
NFL
little,
Canada.
Sorry, with your mic's a little.
Sorry about that. Anyways, NFL Canada has come in and just eaten their lunch. And then it doesn't help that Chase Claypool is Canadian, and there's more Canadians than ever going straight to the NFL. And they're making so much money that they retire when they're done. There was a time for decades that Canadians would go to the NFL and then come back to the CFL and play in their hometown team because it's a great story and playing for their family and friends. They don't need to do that anymore because, as you guys know, football's a brutal sport. working out isn't fun unless you're a freak and you're addicted to it. So we're like, the NFL's just come in and just mowed the CFL, just taken their lunch money, and CFL's done nothing about it.
Do kids grow up in Canada now and play in high school and college wanting to play in the CFL or wanting to go to the NFL?
Here where I am, which is the heartbeat of the Canadian Football League, they dream of playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I mean, we just built a brand new stadium, played in it 2 seasons, maybe 3. Same designer as AT&T Stadium in Dallas. It's a mecca, right? So they do here. But I'll give you an example of a guy by the name of Chris Schultz. He just passed away last week at the age of 61. He grew up 15 miles south of Toronto. And his story was he grew up dreaming of playing for the Dallas Cowboys. Was drafted by them out of Arizona, played for their Cowboys for 4 years, came back to the CFL, played with the Argos, won the Grey Cup with the John Candy, Wayne Gretzky owned Toronto Argonauts, then did 20 years on the TSN panel as an analyst. Southern Ontarians, people in Southern Ontario that grow up, they dream of the NFL. And it doesn't help that Toronto's been trying to get an NFL team for 25 years. It's just brainwashed the people of Toronto, which incidentally is like 5.5 million people, that the NFL's better. Like, they draw crowds routinely in Toronto of 11, 12,000 fans for the Argos, and it's a crime, where they used to get 55,000. Another instance of just getting, again, murdered by the NFL in our own market.
Your mic's still rubbing. Sorry.
I don't know what to do. I'll tuck this in here.
Yeah, sorry. So when you talk about running here, running a little bit later, whatever, I mean, do you see it all as one league, as 2 competing divisions? I mean, you see as one league of I think you would call it the Continental Football League, right? Just that's what takes over all of North America.
Well, I would like to see you guys go to 10 teams in America, or maybe 8 existing and 1 in Mexico City and 1 in Cancun or something. Because Mexico is just an untapped football market, right? So 3 countries, but 20 teams. And the problem that we haven't even brought up in this interview yet is a little thing called the ratio in the CFL. Yeah. Have you heard about it? Yeah. It's a mandated CFL bylaw that 40% of teams need to be Canadian. So if we could merge tomorrow, frankly, if it wasn't for the ratio. But in the 90s, when there were 8 U.S. teams in the CFL, American government would not recognize the ratio. They said it violated antitrust laws, competition laws, which it does. So those teams played with 100% Americans, while the Canadian teams played with 60% Americans. And you didn't really notice the difference on the field. But we're not going to merge, to answer your question, with the ratio still in place. And that is a huge hill. That is a hill a lot of Canadian football people will die on. They don't want, you know why? Because of your population size versus ours, and how many American football players are available versus Canadian players. That's kind of what we're talking about right now. I think most people would be in favor of a merger. They really would. But if it means getting rid of the ratio, it would be the death of Canadian football. And frankly, nobody wants that.
Do you think it would be the death of Canadian football?
It would be the death of Canadian 3-down football. Yeah, right. Because I'm all for. And 20 years ago, I was throwing the entire Canadian game out the window and going to American rules if that's what was going to save it. I mean, in the province of BC and Ontario, they actually play 4-down American rules football now. It's just guys haven't really got my face about it, but I know they're mad when I say, let's not hide behind the ratio. My dream, Reed, or my vision is an American Hockey League model. Are you guys hockey fans at all?
Yeah. I'm a Dallas
fan.
Fan.
Well, there's never been an American ratio in the American Hockey League. No. You know, for 100 years, there were way more hockey players in Canada than the U.S., and there was never a ratio mandating a minimum amount of Americans on the team. It's just not the way Americans think. But the way the CFL does it, that's just so Canadian. And that's just what needs to change. And so my idea, just to go one step further on the full merger, is to take all the players and put them in one talent pool, American, Canadian, and global, have the scouts rank them 1 to 500 and have a draft. And we'll find out who goes where as to where the priority players are.
Because it's so interesting to me, and since we started posting this stuff and getting the discussion, it seems like a lot of CFL fans are like, if it can't be the 3 downs, the ratio, all these things, then we don't want them. We don't want the XFL. We don't want all this stuff. And my question is, and again, we're not the XFL marks, whatever, but you got to look at, where the money's coming from. And if the CFL, where they've turned down all these things, I know that even Brian Woods, who is the CEO of the Spring League, I think he had even reached out to the CFL earlier this year, or last year about, buy into that, all these different things. And it's like, at some point you have to take the lifeline, or you're not going to there's not going to be a boat, right, to get into. I mean, is that am I wrong in thinking that?
You can't.
No, but you
fight your face. You can't do that.
No, but they've been doing it for 100 years. And you have to understand something, gentlemen. This is a key part of the interview. These CFL owners, I know them very well. They're not bad people, but they are holding on to the current CFL business model like grim death. You know why? Because they know if we merge with the XFL, they're gone. And a buddy of mine, they'll be out. And a buddy of mine with the BC Lions, I won't say who he was, he just goes, these guys all like to play Jerry Jones. They like to watch their team in their luxury suite, eat shrimp cocktail, and have everybody kiss their ass because they're the owner. That's why they're hanging on like grim death to the current CFL model. And they also believe, as hard as it is for you guys to believe, that they can, again, pick the Rock's pocket and give them nothing back. Because they're used to doing that. The concept of a partnership is different than the concept of a sponsorship. It's like, give us your $1 million and see you later. And you're lucky to be involved with the CFL. That's what's put them in this bind right now. So
I guess then that brings up I'm trying to draw this here where if they, I guess I'm starting to see why they would even entertain a phone call, as if they are under the naive belief that they can just use the Rock's marketing arm for free. And they've
said that to me.
And now like we've speculated, of course, we were sitting there going, why would the CFL even entertain a phone call from the Rock if they weren't looking to get A, financial help, or B, merge? And now you're proposing a C. They're just looking to use the marketing arm and give nothing back. That's fascinating.
But your mind's going to be spinning tonight trying to get your head around it, but it doesn't surprise me because I know these guys. Go ahead, Reed.
Oh, no,
sorry.
No. So but that's what they're thinking, right? But what do you think is going to happen? I mean, if that's why they answer the phone, right? But if there really is, you've said on your show, CFL's out of money, right? Or they're close to being that. So if that's what they think, but this is what the reality is, what's the next steps? Where do we go?
The next steps are, if the Rock refuses to inject capital into the CFL for this season, they're done. There will be the CFL will fold. They need money from somewhere.
Yeah, this year right now.
They won't play. They will fold. And then the Rock will be able to waltz in and literally buy this league for nothing. And then from there, they rebuild. And that's that 20 team vision that I said to you. And the Rock would be familiar with the ratio from his time in the CFL. My thing is, while I think we should get rid of it, I'm willing to listen to suggestions as to how we can work around it. But I'm not a football guy enough to say how they would do that, or even if Americans would accept it. So they've been turned down by the federal government of Canada for funding. Mm-hmm. They've been turned down by that. They've been turned down by the NFL for funding. They've been turned down by the MLSE for funding. See, they're going everywhere with their hand out. And I know for a fact they've been begging their sponsors here, this football team here, for millions of dollars just to cover their payroll. We're seeing last stages, gentlemen, of the Canadian Football League. So where I see it going is them not having a season this year, folding, and then the XFL walks in and takes it over. That's what I think is going to happen. The CFL would be adamantly against that, obviously, but I don't see any other way.
Wow.
That's the soundbite. That's the soundbite I'm going to use here to tease this.
It's a very scary thought because, like you said, it's a 100-year brand. You would like to think that they'd be willing to change with the times, but it seems like they're playing by the rules from 50 years ago.
They've never changed with the times. And the other thing is, there's a motion been passed in the Canadian government here, a bill within the last couple of months for single game betting that we haven't had allowed in Canada. And the CFL is just like dollar signs going off in their eyes going, oh, we can get in on betting. I'm like, guys, you can't get the betting money until you play games. And you can't play games until you have money. And they don't have money. So they're sitting there. What I'm talking about is money to stage a season. Fly your players in. Pay them. Like, they don't have that money right now. I'm just sitting here waiting to hear some cash injection from somewhere to get this season going. It's not happening. And we are, what are we, middle of March? Training camp would start May 1st. Yeah. We're 6 weeks away. Guys, there was an owner from the Ottawa Red Blacks team in the Ottawa Sun this week said, we're 90% sure we're going to play. 90% sure. But that's going to go right up and maybe until the day before training camp. And I'm like, you can't give yourself wiggle room like that. You can't.
100%. It's got to be 100%.
But here's why they can't do that. We haven't even got into the the vaccination thing.
Oh, that's true.
They have said the only way that they will be able to play is that they get fans in the stands. They won't do a bubble concept like fan-controlled spring league, but they weren't paying their players. No. I mean, a CFL, maybe $6.25 million per team isn't NFL, but it's a lot more than the spring league. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the point is they got to get fans in the stadiums. And while the vaccinations are going okay in Canada, nowhere near what you guys got going. It's rolling in America, it looks like. I saw Dr. Fauci on ESPN last week saying we will not have full capacity stadiums in America this summer. Forget about it. So there's that whole thing about maybe we do throw the doors open to 50% capacity. That's still not enough to pay the payroll. And even if we did, we still have to convince people to buy tickets and come. Right? That's the second hurdle here.
Yep.
And just to reiterate, so because we had talked, I just want to make sure I got all the numbers right. So the TSN is covering the payroll, right? And then this lack of money is just because they haven't played now in 2 years, and because of the lack of fans, and because of the lack of tickets, and because we covered it all last year. The not getting the loan and all that, and the bankruptcy, or not the bankruptcy, but the shuttering kind of last year of all that. So that's where we've kind of all led to this place.
Well, there's been zero sponsorship revenue, because I know for a fact there are corporations that sponsor the Rough Riders here to the tune of into the millions, or like the radio deal where that I was under for 20 years is $500,000 a year radio rights. All of their revenue is predicated on playing on games. So sideline ads, ticket revenue, luxury suites, broadcast rights. Why are you sponsoring a football team if there are no games? I'm not saying you shouldn't. What's in it for a corporation? So that's why they can't get their revenue going, because they've got nothing to deliver.
Got it.
See, it's a real chicken. They need to play to get the revenue, but they need revenue to play.
I get what you're saying. It's a paradox. It's kind of like a choke point situation that, like when, and I don't want to focus too much on wrestling, but Paul Heyman explained this with ECW. Said there's many choke points when it comes to if you have a product, if you have a way to distribute the product, so on and so forth. If one of these things falters, then everything falters. And it seems like that's, like everything is symbiotic. Everything is a paradox, chicken and the egg. But if one of those things falters, the whole thing falters. You can't have two of the three. You've got to have all three. Makes sense.
And I'd like to think that I'm completely out to lunch in all of this, but everything points to what I'm saying. They haven't been able to declare a season because they don't know if they're going to play. Because the player, like, this was hilarious. If you probably followed this, when the announcement came out last week of the collaboration talks, current players were saying, yeah, but when's training camp? Do I need to ask The Rock? Like, forget about collaborating with the XFL. Can you give us some concrete details about this year? And the only reason the owners haven't been able to give them an answer is because they don't know. It's predicated on getting butts in seats. And we don't know when everybody's going to have enough vaccinations across this country to get in. And even when they do, are they going to buy tickets? So listen, it's really pointing to them not playing this season, which goes to the league folding, unfortunately, and the XFL riding to the rescue, The Rock buying it for a song. And I'll say it again, with him being cut by Calgary, by the way, if you've seen all those interviews with him, it seems like it burns in him. They left him destitute with $7 in his pocket. I'm like, you guys really think that he feels that he owes the CFL anything? He has said being cut by the CFL was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. What is in it for him to come back and save you? given what you did in 1995 to him? I haven't got the answer to that.
Yep. Well, Rod, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. You gave us plenty of time, and we are so grateful you came on and chatted about all this stuff. And wow, just really opened up our eyes to a lot of things that were going on. And this is going to take some time to process.
I know. Well, thanks, gents. But you know what? When we do play the Continental Football League, you'll be coming on my show. We'll be analyzing the games. And what's gone on between your followers and my followers is a perfect example of what could happen in the league itself is growth.
Yeah.
Right? Opening our doors to America is the greatest thing ever. I'm not welded to the Canadian game, but you know what? I don't speak for everybody, and it's been fun to talk about. So we'll see. We'll see what happens as it goes. But I appreciate the opportunity.
We really appreciate it. It means a lot for you to come on.
Thanks, guys.